Hello, everyone. Good morning and happy Wednesday. Welcome to Calibra Solutions and Searchlight Cyber's Dark Web webinar entitled Defeating the Dark Web, How Law Enforcement, Government Agencies, and Enterprises Gather Evidence from the Dark Web to Unravel Cybercriminal OPSEC. My name is Gracia White, Business Consultant at Calibra Solutions Limited, and I will be your moderator for this morning's essential discussion. Now, as we all know, the number of cyber attacks on critical infrastructure across the Caribbean has increased exponentially. This is not news. 2023 in particular was significant with respect to the high profile of affected entities, including government agencies and other related businesses under the financial services sector. And it was during a particular cyber breach in Trinidad and Tobago, where the concept of the dark web entered into public discussion. Now, the dark web presents formidable challenges to law enforcement, governments, and enterprises, from ransomware attacks to the sale of drugs, arms, child exploitation materials, and more on the dark web marketplaces. Criminals use networks like Tor, I2P for their anonymity and operate under aliases. This makes identifying criminals and gathering evidence that will stand up in a court of law difficult, but not impossible. So for this morning's webinar, essentially, why are you here? We've brought our partners at Searchlight Cyber to present detailed insight into the strategies and methodologies that can be used to gather critical evidence from the dark web, ultimately disrupting criminal operations and enhancing cybersecurity measures. At Calibra, we are aware of the critical need for increased knowledge sharing and education in general around all aspects of cybersecurity. Our aim today is to impart this knowledge. By the end of the webinar, we hope to provide you with a detailed understanding of the threats the dark web poses and how we can effectively combat these threats in the digital age, utilizing intelligence and monitoring solutions. So before we start with the formal proceedings, I would like to first express thanks to our presenting partners for taking their time to share their expertise with us today. They are Calibra Solutions Limited, experienced experts in cybersecurity, dark web security, data privacy, business intelligence, and analytics, and Searchlight Cyber, your dark web intelligence and deep web intel experts. Throughout the course of the webinar, we encourage you to utilize the Q&A to share questions for presenters. We will have a dedicated Q&A session where we'll answer those questions. I will also have a number of poll questions starting now, which I would encourage you to respond so we can, get feedback in terms of how you feel about dark web security. So without further ado, I will start with the first poll question, which is poll question number 1. What are your expectations from today's webinar? I'll give everyone 20 more seconds. Thank you so much for your responding so far. Thank you, everyone. And these are the poll results. So getting a clear understanding of the dark web was the leading response, followed by recommendations to enhance your organization's security and advice to improve my organization's investigative skills. We will, of course, cover that during the main presentation. Right, so to start our presentations, I would like to introduce Mr. George White. He is the Managing Director of Calibra Solutions Limited. George is a seasoned IT specialist with over 25 years in the information technology realm. Welcome, George.
Thanks for having me. Good morning to everyone, and thanks for joining our event this morning. Okay, so my mission is to introduce Calibra. We've been providing IT solutions across the Caribbean for a very long time. The rationale is that as we become increasingly connected and coexisting via digital transformation initiatives, that presence on the internet opens up to all kinds of challenges. And our meeting today is to shed a bit of light on one particular area in terms of the dark web. And what we've done is bring our esteemed expert partners, Searchlight Cyber, to do that for us. So I'll just quickly outline what's Calibra about, what we do, a little background on the company, and so on. So we've been operating in this space for over 15 years. We're head office in TNT, and we have team members and consultants across several other countries. Predominantly in the information security space, we have over 40 clients across the region. And the value proposition, we're about helping our clients leverage technology to accelerate change and to unlock business success. As Gracia mentioned, we have 4 main solution components that we provide: information security, business intelligence and analytics, financial application software, and IT consulting and advisory services. So what we'll do is just do a quick overview of each of those headings. Information security, and we span several product components. And these 4 bullet points give us a general idea: self-learning, AI and threat intelligence, dark web intelligence and monitoring, which is the focus of today's webinar, trust intelligence, which is about giving businesses visibility, actionable insights and automation across data privacy, data discovery, governance, risk and compliance, and so on, so they can turn trust from abstract concept into competitive advantage. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And the 4th bullet point is about IT security awareness training. What tends to happen is that companies invest a lot in technology, putting in firewalls, antivirus software, and so on. But the weak link in the chain still continues to be employees who are unaware and click on links that they shouldn't, and so on. So it's of paramount importance that we invest in ensuring that employees are all aware and have some knowledge of how to protect themselves and the company's assets from being compromised. So information security, we were the first Darktrace partner in the Caribbean starting in 2016. And Darktrace has become quite popular across the region, using an AI approach to prevent, detect, respond, and recover from cyber threats. This slide looks at the product family of Darktrace, which are the 4 components as indicated there: the ability to be proactive and prevent, the ability to detect what's happening in your network, and very important, to be able to respond autonomously to block these threats from affecting you in any way. And with the 4th product family, Heal is about recovery, setting up playbooks so that if you're compromised, then it's a relatively straightforward initiative to resume normal operations because you have sort of prepared yourselves for that activity. But of course, the best approach is to be proactive and to prevent that from happening in the first place. In terms of Searchlight Cyber, as you will indicate from the subject matter experts, there are two main product components, Cerberus and Dark IQ, and they perform significant functions. And this slide summarizes what we're about this morning. Searchlight Cyber starting in 2017 in the UK and setting up an office also in the US as their two main operating centers, and being built up on a solid technology foundation from the fields of engineering, defense, and academia. And of course, working with several target groups, law enforcement, governments, charities, and across all kinds of industries to protect society from the threats of the dark web. And then the dark web, as we would all know or be able to learn from this event and onward, it's a part of the internet that's intentionally obfuscated to avoid scrutiny from law enforcement and other participants for a particular end. These sites account for approximately 5% of the internet, and the vast majority are used for explicitly criminal purposes. In terms of other areas of information security, we also have a partner, OneTrust, and they're about providing trust intelligence software in the various areas indicated on the slide: data privacy, GRC, IT risk and security, third-party risk. Very importantly, we also have an expert partner called Data Privacy and Security Advisors, and they've been involved in privacy, I would say, from the outset, deeply involved with rolling out privacy across European Union with GDPR. And what we've done is bring that level of expertise with our privacy initiatives in the Caribbean, and providing all the various services, as indicated, privacy gap and risk assessment. And this applies to the Jamaica Data Protection Act, the Barbados Data Protection Act also, and also GDPR being relevant because we do have some interaction with the European Union, whether it's companies that operate here in the Caribbean or various other touch points in which GDPR has to be taken into account. This next slide gives an overview of offerings from OneTrust and the various product modules as shown: privacy management, data governance, going right across to ESG, carbon accounting, and supplier sustainability. Now, in giving an outline of the OneTrust platform, it's really about the various components indicated here: purpose-built, shared data model, an intelligence layer providing regulatory intelligence, risk intelligence, and data intelligence, and the various solutions involved from privacy, security, data governance, etc. And then the outcomes: certifications, regulatory readiness, trust by design, transparency, and operational efficiencies. So this is truly one of the most comprehensive platforms governing this area of trust. Information security awareness training, we partner with KnowBe4, and KnowBe4 has 4 main offerings: the security awareness training and simulated phishing platform, a security coach. So you, for example, you may have employees across your enterprise who need a focused approach. You can actually get a security coach deployed to assist them. Compliance training for various areas of compliance, such as PCI compliance, and a lightweight security orchestration and response, SOAR platform being part of the solution. In the area of analytics, we've worked with IBM Cognos in the past, but our current partner is Qlik, and Qlik has been around for 20 plus years and is one of the solid offerings in terms of a comprehensive business analytics solution. This next slide outlines the components of the Qlik platform, followed by the benefits that are brought across various areas of relevance. And as you know at this point, analytics is not just about reporting, but generating alerts, incorporating AI, collaboration, data catalog, data governance, and all kinds of things that the modern business analytics platform provides. In the financial application software area, our partner Mimix has about 22 clients across the Caribbean, including 3 central banks, and they have a range of offerings for investment, trust, and banking customers. And fourthly, in terms of Calibra, our advisory and consulting services include strategy and roadmap development, assisting clients in various areas. You may have a shortage of skills and resources. We assist with interim or virtual IT management, program and project management, and IT system and vendor selection. In terms of our partners, Darktrace, we mentioned Searchlight Cyber is our main focus, OneTrust, KnowBe4, Qlik, data privacy and security advisors. I mentioned Mimix, and Hart, Murad, and Fata is our legal partner in terms of dealing with the legal aspects of data privacy or data protection. And we've done quite a lot of work with this company in Jamaica, which recently rolled out their legislation for companies to comply with the Jamaican Data Protection Act. So that sort of summarizes Calibra. This page outlines our contact information. We're based in Arima in Trinidad and Tobago. Our email address, our telephone contacts, our website, and of course, we can be connected via various social media channels. Thanks to everyone for joining, and we hope the morning will be a constructive one. That's all for me, and I will stop sharing at this point, and we continue with our main presenter.
Great, thank you so much, George. So before I bring in our main presenter, I would like to launch poll question number 2 and ask for your feedback in that respect. Right, so poll question number 2, what aspect of dark web security do you find most challenging? So I'll allow 10 more seconds, but as I segue into Mr. Stephen Barr, who is a senior threat intelligence engineer at Searchlight Cyber. So Stephen, you'd be pleased to know that the responses to this are fairly even between or amongst protecting personal or enterprise data from dark web, monitoring and detecting dark web activity, and tracing and identifying cyber criminals on the dark web. which I know you'll speak to in some form during your presentation. So I'm going to end the poll. I'll also share the results with everyone. Thank you so much again for participating. And now for the main attraction, Mr. Stephen Barr. So Stephen, I'll hand over to you. Stephen, as I mentioned, is the Senior Threat Intelligence Engineer at Searchlight Cyber. In his presentation, he will first go into dark web, an overview of what it entails, its definition, its distinction from surface web, and of course, gathering evidence from the dark web, how exactly that can be done. Stephen, thank you so much. Over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time you guys are going to spend with me going over defeating the dark web. I've been working with Calibra since I've joined Searchlight, which was just around, say, a year and a half ago at this point. So it's an honor to be here and an honor to speak with you guys. But before I even talk about myself, George did share a little bit about what we do. I'm just going to add on to that, and just to understand who we are. You know, we've been founded that we found that it was really difficult identifying and policing the dark web. So that's the people, the assets, and the infrastructure. And we've partnered with law enforcement to protect society from these threats on the dark web. We have lead technical aspects and even the world's largest dark web investigation tool. And we help develop these tools, the techniques, and the databases. And they're really unique to what we do. And it's probably the most advanced in this world. So our team is comprised of world-class specialists, some thought leaders, and I'm happy to share a lot of the intel that we found in regards to the Caribbean, and then explore some actual investigative cases to where we're going to explore OPSEC and how law enforcement can leverage these tools, but additionally, how enterprise can follow the same direction as law enforcement to identify precursors of attacks. But again, thank you guys. Stephen Barr, Senior Threat Intel Engineer. I support the public and private sector across the North and South Americas. We do have a UK office as well, and they handle more of the EMEA side of things. I have around 5 years of experience in the threat intel space, and I'm happy to share a lot of my knowledge that I've learned over the years in that area. So getting into it, and before I really get to the good stuff, I just want to quickly tell you a little bit about more of what Searchlight does, right? So we're providing law enforcement agencies as well as enterprise organizations with access to live and even archived data from the dark web. And this enables dark web investigation as well as automated monitoring. So when we're looking at the two tools, Cerberus and DarkIQ, you'll start to hear me reference that. And this is going to provide a lot of value to security teams as well as law enforcement, because it's going to accelerate their dark web investigations. It's going to provide them with a secure access, right, to our version of the dark web. And previously, this was inaccessible, right? And it's very difficult to start tracking all the different hidden services that these criminal undergrounds take between dark web forums, those marketplaces, and even app chats and Telegram channels. So the agenda today, we're just going to start to talk about dark web demystified. So for those of you who maybe are unfamiliar with what the dark web is, I'll explore that a little bit. It's probably not the most exciting, but it's going to be interesting because there's going to be a lot of context in there in terms of what data we capture, what we find from our experts. Then we'll go into a bit more targeted ransomware in the Caribbean as well as Trinidad and Tobago. And then from OSINT to attribution, we're going to start to explore an example of someone who had been prosecuted, how we can take the OSINT information from the dark web and provide that to our cases and leverage that in real time. Then we're going to look at a real life investigation example on an individual called IGORAR. And then we'll end with your questions. And of course, I appreciate all of your time. So getting into it, the dark web demystified. Well, what is the dark web, right? We understand there's clear web. We know that there's deep web, but what's dark web? And just to give some clarification, clear web, which if we're using the iceberg analogy here, it makes up 4% of the internet. It's very vast still, but this refers to the part of the internet that's indexed by Google, Bing, Wikipedia. But when we talk about deep web, this includes all the web pages and data that are not indexed by those search engines, right? So this is encompassing maybe private databases, password protected sites, content behind paid walls. And though the deep web is not always inherently illegal or illicit, it just simply refers to content that just isn't readily or easily accessible through the standard search engines that you might leverage today. What we'll be focusing on today is more of the dark web, which is actually slightly larger than the deep web, makes up of around 5 to 6%. This is going to contain things like hidden services. It might require an individual to have special software, special configurations, any authorization access they might need, right, to build a reputation on these sites, to have insight on different forums, activity. And it's often associated with illicit activities, such as illegal marketplaces, forums, and even other services that you'll find on there. So users will typically access the dark web using it for anonymizing their networks, like Tor, which we'll explore. And while the dark web is often portrayed negatively, and it does make up a large portion of it with illegal activities, it also serves as a platform for whistleblowers, activists, and just individuals seeking anonymity for legitimate reasons. We won't be exploring that. We will be exploring more of the darker side of the dark web. To understand how Tor is used, if we actually look at the example on the left here, it's the Tor network, right? When you use the Tor, it's your internet traffic that is being encrypted and routed through a series of what we call volunteered run servers. We also know them as nodes. And these nodes, specifically, if we start with the entry node, it's allowing you to connect to that the Tor network. So your traffic's actually encrypted and it's being sent to that Tor entry node, also known as a guard node. And this node only knows your real IP address. It doesn't know what you're doing on the internet. So it'll collect that. And then we get to what we call the middle relay. So the middle nodes, which can contain a variety of different middle nodes. And it's taking that entry node, it's looking at that encrypted traffic that's being passed through those several nodes. And each middle node, just so you know, only knows the IP address of the previous node and the next node in the chain. So these nodes actually decrypt only one layer of encryption that's passing the data. So it makes it really difficult to identify who's on the other end because it's being bounced around so many times and it's encrypted through multiple different relays. And then finally, we do have that exit node where the traffic reaches it and it is decrypted then at that point and it's sent out to the regular internet, but it's only, again, decrypting that last node, which allows them to get access. And then this leads us into understanding, well, what's on Tor, right? And we know Tor as the dark web and we understand that there are hidden services. So again, reaching out to Tor, you'll often find that hidden services are referred to as the dark web, also known as onion services, and they're just a unique feature that Tor allows. So why is it used? And one of the reasons why it's used is because it allows the website operator, it allows the host the website operator to host that content on the Tor network while remaining anonymous. So these websites have addresses ending in .onion rather than your traditional names like .com, .org, .gov, for example. So these onion addresses, just so you know, are cryptographic keys, a variety of cryptographic keys and numbers that range, and that string falls behind a .onion. So that's how you'll get access to them. And these hidden services, just so you know, have been associated and are associated with illegal activities such as drug trafficking, weapon sales, and even hacking services. So selling exploit kits, ransomware as a service. So as a result, of course, this has faced a lot of scrutiny with law enforcement and governments worldwide. And to show you some of that data, we can see here that Searchlight has gathered this and provided it back to you. So you can have an understanding of what we see daily, weekly, and monthly and yearly on our data set. So what we see is that the sheer amount of data that's being processed through and shared through the Tor network can be really overwhelming and difficult to capture. So since there are so many different hidden services, you don't know what ones are being leveraged today by the criminal underground, we provide that back to you with our Cerberus tool. So we can see here, starting with the 5 million global uniquely daily users on Tor. Now, not all of these individuals are actively posting, but they are lurking and they're taking data when they can. Right, someone who is a a threat actor may not want to post because they don't want unwanted attention to them. Now, we do see on a weekly basis, on average, over 1.2 million forum posts. We know historically, we've actually have over 850,000 different onion servers, or servers within Cerberus, and we contain over 86 million pieces of OSINT information that law enforcement enterprise can pivot off of to further their investigations. New market listings, which are going to contain things like weapons, drugs, people's identity, personal identifying information. We see close to 6 million of those since January of 2023. And ending here with 65% of all searches on the dark web are explicitly illegal content. So when I actually go into some of the usage, this research is actually reinforced by our co-founders. And as I mentioned, that 65% of searches on the Tor network are for illegal content like drug, hacking, malware, again, weapons and fraud. This also relates that 42% of searches are unfortunately for CSEA content, and it's probably one of the most popular categories by far. CSEA, also known as CSAM, and you'll start to look at this T-graph. It might be a little difficult to see, I apologize, but to understand that when we look at cryptocurrency, we can see that it's related to child abuse, but also cybercrime, drugs, fraud. And if we actually look at the crossover here between terrorism and cyber, we can see that at the bottom here, that terrorism accounts for a lot of different chat rooms, child abuse, the cybercrime that I mentioned. We see file sharing services, and of course, pornography, unfortunately. So the dark web does contain a lot of explicit material, but we help with that by providing it to you in a safe manner, of course. And one of the questions you want to ask yourself is, well, what can we do about it? And well, quite a lot can be done. And I've actually borrowed this life cycle here from our head of threat intel. And it's really showing us how you can go from a question. An example of this might be, how can we identify a criminal behind drug smuggling ring on the dark web and take action? It's just a continued process of gathering and analyzing and interpreting the data based on the changing needs. So if we actually take a look at this, we can see that plan and direction is based on the operation we're running. So we want to identify, we want to break up that drug smuggling gang operating on the dark web. We can even correlate this back to vulnerabilities, right? We understand that there are exploits out there. We need to find those hacker forums where they're discussing those exploits that could be vulnerability to our organization or a huge risk. If we look at step 2, the collection piece, this one here is it's a little bit more challenging, right? So we have to make sure that the dark web data we need for this operation is done manually, and it helps us identify and gain access to the groups that are not easy. So the collection piece is difficult, but with Cerberus, because we have access to those different forums, those different marketplaces, all on a single pane of glass, it makes it very easy for that manual process, and it saves a lot of time and efforts. We start to process that data, right? Sanitizing, we go through it, understand what it is we capture, and cleaning up that data to see what we gathered. We're going to then analyze that data to see, where does our work actually begin? And then dissemination, right? Sharing that intelligence we have gone through, we've cleaned up, and sharing that with other agencies, sharing that with other organizations, and even present this to a court of law, because again, this is considered OSINT information, and we've actually leveraged these to prosecute over 40,000 individuals. Going on, the last reference here I do want to talk about is the main pain points, right? And the main pain point with the dark web is collecting intel from those closed or offline groups. And we have access to that information. It exists today, and that's the real power of the tool, right? It gives you access to those high value historical and new dark web data, the criminals, that have poor OPSEC. We can start to see and begin our investigation and pivot towards that poor OPSEC that they have, right? Link together different aliases, the identity information for them. We can uncover who these threat actors are. And additionally, even if a post has been deleted, because we retain all this information, it still allows you guys to have access to Cerberus and capture this information via our data lake. And what we're actually seeing here is a great outline of both Cerberus, our proactive threat hunting tool, and DarkIQ, our automated monitoring intelligence. Primarily, I will be talking a lot around Cerberus. Was founded primarily for law enforcement, but organizations do find a need because it helps them investigate criminals, helps them look at ransomware. We have a ransomware tracker that tracks over 50 of the most prolific ransomware groups, which we will see examples that are of ones that are targeting Trinidad, Tobago, and the Caribbean. National security, attribution, so taking the OSINT information, attributing, which we'll also see examples of how we can perform that within Cerberus. On the fraud side, very particular for banks, how are people deploying, for example, fixed malware on different devices on ATMs and being able to pull money out of ATMs. And then the power of the stealth browser, which is actually a virtual machine sandbox, which allows the end user to be fully anonymous, go on to the dark web in real time and perform sandbox investigations, download information, see and obtain what potentially these threat actors are sharing out there. And this actually goes really hand in hand with DarkIQ, which more on an enterprise organization, right? We're going to start to monitor our supply chains and third parties. We can feed that information that we're getting back to the threat hunting team to see where there's risk. It helps IR teams investigations, right? If there's a risk and alert coming in, they can focus their efforts on the timeliness of that data, and they can focus on the ones that are more prolific or high priority. Security operations, CNI protections, right? If there's a potential account takeover, how can we prevent that? And any insider threat. And this is all done with the Searchlight platform via our forums that we index, the pay sites, the traffic. We can actually visualize incoming and outgoing traffic, so you can understand if there's a sign of a reconnaissance from those threat actors, the different marketplaces that we capture, like Too Easy or Russian market, our app chats and Telegram channels, which have been more prolific in recent times, and some onion sites, or majority onion sites actually, and of course leaked data that are at the power of your fingertips to, again, prevent attacks from happening. So what I'm going to get into a little bit more of the kind of crimes that we see happening in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is all of the Caribbean, mind you. So starting with the criminal extortion of the ransomware groups. And we can see here that we have why are attackers using ransomware today? And the reason being is because it causes a high impact, right? It's damaging for the victim. It has the possibility of a large profits, right? If someone is taking down your servers and having control of your network, it can be quite damaging. There's remediation costs, there's legal fees, and this can extend over a 5-year period. So even if they don't get the money from you alone, they have secondary means of getting it. So that's posting it on XSS, exploit, to breach forums. There are multiple to the forums where they'll post your data and someone else will bid on it and purchase it. So there are facets of ways that people can share that information, and it could be very expensive and time consuming. And some of the reasons why the Caribbean might be a target are just sometimes there's limited security measures, right? The Caribbean may sometimes have difficulty with their cyber infrastructure and resources, right? It makes it a very attractive target for these ransomware groups, as they know that there may be weaker defenses and maybe more vulnerabilities and exploitations, right? There is some local economies that have a reliance on tourism, right? And these threat actors understand that this heavily reliance on tourism is a significant source of revenue, and they can start targeting hotels, resorts, travel agencies, and just any really tourism-related business that could disrupt those operations, and it could have a significant impact on that local economy. If we start to talk about on the financial side, right, when these threat actors are targeting more of the, let's say, financial institutions, offshore companies, maybe high-valued individuals, banks, they know they can pay these hefty sums, and they will want to gain re-access to their systems and data. So they will tend to go after these targets as well. We also have to take a look at geopolitical location. So if we see that the location of the Caribbean has the proximity of some of the most major shipping lanes in international borders. So it's a very attractive target for these criminals, because they want to seek to exploit this and cause as much damage as possible. And of course, one of the the side of all this is that today a tool may not be leveraged by law enforcement, and in some cases they see this as a sense of impunity, so they won't feel like there's any sense of danger when they're going out into these areas and targeting individuals. I do want to highlight some of this data. This is Cerberus data that we've captured, posted by different ransomware groups. What we see here, if I apologize if I mute, I may sneeze here in a second. But we see some of the more commonly targeted countries in the Caribbean, and this is as a lifetime since we've been around. We can see here that Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and Trinidad and Tobago have been recent high-value targets. Of course, this is ever growing as we continue to see more threat actors popping up and more organized crime happening as well. If I actually go into this next slide, we can see historically the top threat actors. So these are actually ransomware groups. I don't know if you are all familiar with them. We will explore a couple, but when we take a look, historically, Lockbit, Conti, Grief, RE-Evil, and recently Black Hat, also known as Alpha V. If you've been following the news, Black Hat and Alpha V worked together to take down the MGM casino in Las Vegas. Lockbit, though, was recently taken down. They are back up. We have Black Basta, No Escape, Play, Ransom House, and Reseda. I believe that's how you say that. But again, all of these threat actor groups, this is just a small portion of over 50 of the ones that we collect. And they target historically consumer services, right? Diversified financials, banks, financial institutions, telecommunication services, public sectors. Of course, recently we see more of the public sector side, utilities, food and staples, retailing, diversified financials, consumer services. All of this data is available to track within the Cerberus tool, and it just allows organizations to comprehend what's being targeted and how they can patch their systems or keep themselves safe. As you start monitoring your partners, your suppliers, we tend to see a lot of information that ends up being shared could potentially be yours through your partners and third parties that are leveraged. And just to highlight a few things here with Lockbit, Black Hat, and Clop, this is an example of some of the data that we capture to understand who these groups are, right? We see when they were first active. We see when some of the latest victims that they have, or total list of victims as a whole. And we also identify known aliases for you. So it's easily pivoting, saying, hey, we found Lockbit support and Lockbit on XSS and exploit, not just their own Onion server that they host to post this data. We know and we found exactly where their aliases are, making it very easy for your security teams to track and monitor these individuals. And as we know, these are the most prolific groups currently that are targeting the Caribbean. All right, OSINT to attribution. So I'm moving on from that ransomware. I do want to talk about how law enforcement can now start to unravel the criminal's OPSEC, right? By connecting those aliases that we have on the dark web, the joint accounts, and information that could potentially lead to arresting and identifying these individuals. So before I do talk about OSINT, I think we can clarify that we understand OSINT as insight that's gained through processing from analyzing public data sources or publicly available information. With Cerberus, it's a little bit different. We're using it to search on different pieces of information or data points that could be leveraged to further your investigation. This can range from data points like email addresses, phone numbers, Telegram handles, cryptocurrency addresses or wallets, credit card numbers, social security numbers, so much more I can go through here. But the idea is we can take that OSINT information, see if there's any threats directly related to us, or through poor OPSEC to see if there's any left behind data that we can leverage again to prosecute someone in the court of law. And where we begin is we want to understand is who do we need to identify? And sometimes when we look at these sites, we want to identify and allocate a resource to the ones that are the site admins. It could be the site admins or sometimes the most prolific users. And to do this, you can leverage this through our Cerberus tool. And what Searchlight is doing here is it's actually surprisingly straightforward. You're searching on a specific forum and you're looking at that pre-curated popular site data. So what we're seeing there is, and what we're identifying are the top users, the top contributors, whose names keep appearing. And then you can pivot off of those and start seeing their timeline. So when they were created, what were they doing? Where were they posting? How frequently they were posting? And that's really the real power of the tool. Remember, I said these threat actors have poor OPSEC when they first started out. Even though they are professional criminals, we can go back historically and see where things may have slipped, whether there was a telephone number, an IP address, an email address, or crypto wallet that's linked back to them. We'll actually explore that here. This is an actual illustration of a well-advertised example from around March, July of 2023. This is when U.S. law enforcement arrested an individual or a man believed to be Pom Pom Purin, who was actually the owner of breach forums and hacks forums. What you tend to find on those sites where a lot of data posted are being sold around many different organizations. So in this example, if you actually take a look at this screen as it's pivoting through, we're actually towards the end of that search, but what you saw in the beginning of that was the possibility to search on the results by forums, right? It's exploring different posts. We click on the user's profile, which we see here. We can create a case on that, and we can review all that information that's posted, right? We see there's OSINT information all in a single pane of glass. We saw that there was a PGP key. In this instance, we saw the ranking as they were admin, though saying it's still active at this point. This is historical data that we're looking at. And it may not be directly involved in this investigation, but we can also see that there are PGP keys, which we can leverage as another basis of our investigation, which we can include in our OSINT to pivot off of in the future, which we will actually explore. And you might be asking yourself, how at this point we collect that OSINT information. Well, how else can I use that? And I like to use the analogy of a mechanic, right? If you go and bring your car into the shop and he only has a hammer, we can all say he probably wouldn't be very efficient at repairing your car. Maybe to bang out a dent, but to replace a tire, fill it up with air, hammer is only going to go so far. And the same goes with the data you're collecting, right? We want you to leverage this across other data sets. And what I mean by this, and I can give you an example. Recently, there was a case that I was working on with a not-for-profit we work with, and we knew of an individual. We plugged in the individual's username, and we found the forums, we found the market listings, the paste bins, the pages that they were associated with, but we also found leaked data. And now, though often than not, this isn't happening all the time, we did identify a password to an email address which was associated to that username. So we actually took that email address, plugged it in to social media, which this case we actually plugged into a number of them, but an Instagram handle popped up. And based off of that, we were able to identify an individual because their username was the same and they were posting similar content. Now, you can't say for sure, but as you start to build your OSINT profile, you'll identify potentially who this individual is by collecting all this data and passing it through other assets or facets of tools that you're using today. And the same goes with, looking at the site mapping, right? Understanding how these onions or their servers are maintained, whether the site has been seized or not. And why it's important to capture this is we're not only capturing the directories, we're also capturing OSINT intel on them. So what IP address is associated with this? What are there any IP or crypto addresses as well on there? And then, of course, any outgoing or incoming links, of course. And then if you have a red team, if you want to take it a step further on the law enforcement side, if we take a look at the bottom example, Apache, we can see that it's on a version of 2.3.9 when the latest version could be 3.0. So taking those versions, understanding that there's a way to exploit this could help with taking down these criminal undergrounds as well. And this is going to lead me for the last 5 minutes. I know we're getting down on time here, so I appreciate everyone's time. We're going to actually look and explore a real-life investigation. And because we really can't talk about any active investigations or users on the platform, we're actually going to reverse engineer this investigation. We're going to showcase some of the poor OPSEC on the dark web and how this can open doors for investigators. And in this final section, I'm just going to walk you through that. Right, we're going to unravel that, look at the poor OPSEC, and we're going to start to connect different aliases on the dark web, joint accounts, and how this information can lead to identifying and arresting an individual. So these are actual screenshots, excuse me, from from Cerberus. So from this particular case, it's actually referenced from a 2022 case. This is on a man and a woman, Devlin Hosner and Holly Adams, and they were both successfully charged with the conspiracy to distribute and possess fentanyl and methamphetamines, as well as the conspiracy to launder money. Ultimately, a lot of their activity was conducted by leveraging the Tor to keep themselves anonymous on the dark web and utilizing existing marketplaces to create profiles and advertise their products across the United States. Give me 1 second. Cool. What you'll also see here is that you'll start to begin to see slight parallels, right? They're lacking in specific areas, and where we see those parallels or overlaps is going to be with information where these criminals left or exposed poor OPSEC. So where their Telegram handles were and their email addresses that were very similar, right? So an example of that might be a slight deviation with a different letter or number. So for example, this does happen a lot, and we're only human. We tend to try to take the easiest way out. And with this information, we could append it with additional characters and understand that, say, hey, let's look for additional areas that they might be posting. And if we dig deeper, we start to identify their profile card. So when they were registered, and we'll start to identify their Telegram channels. Let me just make sure. Yep. Okay. So we'll start to identify their Telegram channels and their, their PGP key, which can be, again, leveraged for additional searching and across the Cerberus. So as a result, this reference shows a query and the indexes on the dark web. We can see clearly that there were a number of references prior to this, and that's including the drug listings and the current market that they're operating out of now. In this actor tab, which collects all the information, again, on any related information on that specific site, we can very clearly see when this user was registered, as I mentioned, how many listings they have in this particular market, any insight on how long this profile has been active. And in this case, we can see it's been around, first seen since February 12th to August 7th of 2021. We can also get high-level indicators of OSINT, right? As I mentioned, we see the Telegram channel. We do find the PGP key. And these are generally used to utilize, again, to cross-reference back and reuse that email address and phone numbers across multiple profiles. So we can start to combine different profiles to understand who this individual is and find that for OPSEC. Whether it's an email address, a Telegram channel, we can take this specific data points and we can look directly at the OSINT capability. So additional tools that we can use for matching this information across, like, again, the open source resources we have. This is used to identify the username by leveraging across Facebook, Twitter, or even some pornographic sites like OnlyFans. So this was actually the downfall. We actually took an email address associated to this individual, and we're able to find out who they were based off of that on clear websites. So if we look at the OSINT tab, there are particular interests here that we've pivoted off of. And now if I go into the PGP key, you're going to start to see here all the collection methods we have when it comes to this individual user. So because of that, they did register a personal email, which is the email address that we leverage and pivoted across. Now, this doesn't happen with every user. This is just an example for today where their security just was not very good. And you'll tend to find where they slip up on poor OPSEC. And in this specific case, this was their downfall. We did gather all this intel from different locations, different marketplaces, and all this information was used at a court of law to prosecute these individuals. But the power of the tool allows you to save alerts, save this intel within a case, collect this information, and present it back in a neat and timely fashion. And that's it, guys. I do appreciate everyone's time today. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to answering some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate it. Do not go anywhere because we'll be jumping into Q&A very shortly. I would ask our attendees to facilitate me or indulge me with one more poll question before we get into Q&A. And thank you for the questions that we've received so far. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions. Questions are always good. All right, so let's go with poll number 3, which is, and this is for IT personnel or just anyone from an investigative perspective on the webinar today. Can you monitor or investigate the dark web as part of your security organization? All right, some good feedback so far. Mainly not yet, but there are plans to implement soon, which is good. There are persons or entities that already have dedicated resources and tools in place, and of course, evaluations as well. All right, thank you so much for participating in the poll here. So Stephen George, I already have a question or a few questions in the Q&A, which I'll start with. So question, can this type of monitoring, can this type of dark web monitoring tell if my company is being specifically targeted on the dark web, and to what extent can this be done? So how popular is my company as a potential target to attackers?
Yeah, I mean, a number of things, right? Threat actors aren't going to outright say, hey, I'm going to attack that hospital or that bank. What we tend to look at, if we take DarkIQ as an example, is it tells a story, right? We're looking at conversations from forums that people are posting. What DarkIQ is doing is saying, hey, find me everything in regards to this individual or this enterprise company. And it's going to show you related conversations of people saying, hey, I'm looking to do something. I have access to potentially this subdomain. Because we look at the subdomains, the top level domains, we start to see that. We start to identify people sharing that access that they claim to have, right? They might say, I have a bank in the Caribbean. Their net worth is worth this much. And we set up keyword searches to identify this information. And we can look at the historical traffic as well. So if someone is mentioning you, we see a trend that there's an uptick in high valued or high prolific alerts that are coming in, which then we take that traffic piece and then we start to monitor. Okay, they claim to have some of our assets. Well, we don't know what assets they do have. Well, let's take a look at our traffic piece, which usually can tell you where they were trying to get access, right? When we see high peaks of incoming traffic to maybe, let's say, a VPN account, right? That's usually a sign that someone's trying to get access. Maybe they purchased credentials or they were initially able to exploit something. Now they're selling those VPN accounts online. Well, because we're looking at the traffic, we can send that to a SOC team or security team to mitigate that, right? Quarantine those areas, set up a honeypot, block access. So capturing it before it becomes a bigger issue.
Thanks, Stephen. Maybe a part 2 to that, which I think you alluded to, insider threats. How critical or how dangerous even are insider threats?
Yeah, they are very dangerous. And why they're so dangerous is a lot of industries are just unaware of people going out, and specifically the dark web. As I mentioned, it is a facet for individuals to not only do bad things, but express themselves, whistleblow. But in some cases, if they have other means of collecting money, they understand this and they will share that information. They'll exfiltrate your data and push it to the dark web. Maybe they have connections with someone, but being able to monitor your outgoing traffic is a huge red flag, right? If there's any outgoing traffic to the dark web internally, we can presume that either someone has gotten access or someone internally is posting. A worst case scenario that I've seen, though makes up maybe 0.1%, was there was a disgruntled employee who did not like their CEO of the company, and they ended up posting a lot of personal information about that individual. Their make and model of the vehicle with the license plate, family members' names, addresses, telephone numbers. They were able to get their hands on private information, credit card numbers, social security numbers. So things like that tend to be more on the extreme side of things, but they happen. And a lot of organizations are unaware of this because they don't have visuals into the dark web. And this is where we tend to see where most things start, right? It's typically on the dark web.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to speak a little bit about enterprises. As you know, we have a large number of enterprises across the region. And to also highlight one of the items you presented with respect to markets which you know are targeted. You mentioned DR, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Trinidad and Tobago as having ongoing threats. With respect to enterprises, considering this evolving landscape, how can they proactively prepare and defend against these ransomware attacks in 2024 and beyond? Because, you know, they're never going to stop. They'll only get more sophisticated and more complex.
Yeah, I mean, threat intel at the end of the day is going to be the silver lining to everything, right? It's very difficult to get access to all this data, right? It's one of the biggest challenges. And what you tend to fall and find is that you'll look for that curated data through news articles, through magazines, through Twitter handles, and that data can be slightly outdated, right? It takes time for someone to find this data and bring it back to you. And it's not always exactly what you're looking for. When we talk about organizations, we can take DarkIQ, we can take Cerberus, we can curate it around your tool set. So if you're using Fortinet firewall, if you're using Outlook emails, for example, we can curate Boolean logic strings to alert you on new exploits on hacker forums, new listing posts, new ransomware as a service, so that your team is it's essentially they're being proactive in the sense that they're reacting to the new enhanced alerts that are coming in. And those alerts are going to keep them ahead of the game. The data is going to be curated to them so that they're able to take action and protect themselves. Because again, we saw Citrix bleed last year, which was towards the end of the year. That was a big trend. And that took about 2-3 months before it became a very popular topic in the cybersecurity industry, which that tends to be, right? It's always around trends. So we want to make this as curated to your organization as possible so you guys can protect yourselves in near real time. I think you're muted.
Sorry, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Still on enterprises. Specifically say, so you alluded to banks, financial services sector. What about other sectors, some of which are, you know, particularly critical in our region, Trinidad as well, energy sector, manufacturing sector? Dark web intelligence monitoring may not be obvious, and George, feel free to input your comments as well. But how can those sectors, energy sectors, manufacturing, supply chain, how can they benefit from dark web intelligence and monitoring?
Yeah, so actually we have a use case around this. So critical infrastructure is a big component, right? Especially during times of unfortunate war. And it's probably the future of what we're looking at when it comes to war. So when we see Log4j taking down pipelines, oil and gas companies, we see that as recent as the Israel and Hamas, we see that there are individuals and terrorist organizations targeting critical infrastructure. And with our use case around ICS and SCADA systems, we're able to monitor the trends of what they're trying to target, how they exploit it, and specifically keeping you alert within real time. So again, you would receive an email notification, you could pivot, read about it, and see who's talking about it, start to track some of the more prolific threat actors. So yeah, critical infrastructure is a very large part of it. And what you'll find is that a lot of critical infrastructure, they know they'll get paid, right? These ransomware groups are trying to get paid. They're trying to make their money. And to do that, they know that these critical infrastructures have a lot of money, and it would be devastating and crippling for societies and different organizations.
Thanks, Stephen. Another question from our audience. All right, so Cerberus concentrates a lot on dark web intelligence. Does Searchlight offer any solutions with respect to brand protection, example, website takedown or impersonation?
Yeah, yes, we do. So we'll actually take a look at phishing, typo squatting sites. The brand protection piece is we can start to look at any facets or avenues where they're mentioning you. This can be abbreviations. I like to use Bank of America, if you guys are familiar. They have multiple names, right? B of A, BOA. So we're trying to indicate the way that people are going to reference you on the dark web, see how they're talking about your brand. What you'll find is you'll have maybe even disgruntled employees who might talk badly, but of course also threats that are on there that are specifically targeting you. So understanding if any information is posted out there will give you that visibility into brand protection.
George, a general question for you. So in your presentation, you alluded to the many layers of cybersecurity or information security that Calibra offers. For companies that already have some sort of cybersecurity in place, why should they also include dark web security?
It's a good question, Gracia. But what I've learned from the seasoned information security professionals across the Caribbean is that you can never be complacent. You can never be satisfied that you're protected against all scenarios. So it's just a good professional approach to look at all possible angles. And dark web, because of its importance, is one of those that needs some attention, even if it wasn't being done before. So it's really about being proactive, looking at all possible angles of vulnerability and taking actions accordingly. The other thing I would point out to Stephen is that there are various organizations, government organizations, CSIRTs that have a role to play in protecting national infrastructure or countries as a whole. They're going to need tools like Searchlight Cyber provides, and maybe a lot more attention needs to be placed on how they can utilize these tools to become more proactive rather than reactive. Because in many instances, they come in after the fact, but we have to use an approach where we could be preventative in our approach rather than respond after being affected.
Thanks. I'll revert to law enforcement, but I want to take this question from our audience. Can Searchlight solutions integrate with SIEM solutions to present meaningful data?
Yes, we actually have a native integration with Splunk, and we have API for both tools where we can just push the data to any SIEM. We've done many in the past, not just Splunk. You can think Alien Vault and really most except JSON data, which is how our data comes out. So yeah.
Right, sorry, my windows. Okay, for law enforcement, I have a question here. What are the typical challenges of accessing intelligence on the dark web, and how does Searchlight Cyber help mitigate this?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge for law enforcement is getting access to this data, right? If you're doing it without a tool like Searchlight Cyber, it's hard to identify all the more prolific sites, right? don't see which ones are trending, which ones have the traffic. You can't really see all the users. It makes it very difficult. What Searchlight Cyber does, it's crawling these with some very intelligent crawlers, indexing all of that data, tagging OSINT information, so breaking it down very easy, like an easy to view single pane of glass view, taking that information and then expanding upon it. So you can start to connect different aliases. You can start to identify multiple sites that these single users might be on, or even organized users, right? We see organized crime happening. They might be intertwined, not in just the cyber side of hacking and exploiting different machines. They might make money elsewhere by selling drugs and selling weapons and maybe even pornography in the worst case scenario. So by seeing all of that, being able to mesh that data together to tell a story, paint a picture, and of course that poor OPSEC that I've gone over, it's easily identifiable through the Cerberus platform and even the DarkIQ platform.
Thanks, Stephen. And I guess a part two to that question, which you've responded to, but I'll just mention it. How can law enforcement agencies benefit from dark web intelligence? And a part three as well. So Telegram's emerged, I would say, over the last few years as, you know, one of the most vulnerable platforms. Can you tell us a little bit about why Telegram specifically has become like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So why is it beneficial for law enforcement? Well, starting with that, we know this is where majority of where the illicit content is being posted. It's initially where these threat actors and criminals can feel safe and operate out of that anonymity, right? No one knows who they are. They can operate in that sense, and they can say anything they like, do anything they want without any repercussions. And we actually see that with Telegram, because Telegram does have encryption. So with our tool, because one of the challenges is to being able to capture that, Telegram trends. Maybe for 1 week, we see a Telegram channel that's selling credit card information, and then the next week it's down. And then we see a new one pop up. Searchlight Cyber and its efforts are collecting all of these, retaining that information on the historical ones. So if you're an enterprise, if we're talking about on the enterprise side, you can go back historically to look at that information. Same with on the law enforcement side, right? There's poor OPSEC there, going back, looking at that, seeing the new ones that are trending and popping up, correlating that intel with other users. Telegram is I don't want to say it's a new dark web, because dark web is always going to be around because of its anonymity, but it's just a new way for criminals to advertise their product, right? Whether it's drugs or the weapons or the credit cards that they're selling. And it, again, isolates them and helps them build that reputation, right? Everyone knows who IGO was. And the fact that they can build this reputation, have their own Telegram channel to consolidate all their consumers, makes it easier for them as well. So, and that's where we give you all that visibility with both Cerberus and DarkIQ.
Thanks, Stephen. Another question from our audience. So much of the functionalities or investigations in Cerberus seem to be human-driven. Can any automation be applied to simplify the investigation process?
Yes. So DarkIQ is actually fully automated. We actually collect what we call attributes on the organization. So the tool is even smart enough to enumerate on those attributes. So what I mean by that is we take a top level domain. The tool will find all the subdomains, find all the employees' email addresses, the public facing infrastructure, brand names. Maybe if you're looking at a key man protection, we can start putting key important people in the organization that could potentially be targeted. And it's looking across clear web, deep web, and dark web, actually. So it's actually going through all facets. And when I say clear web, it's not all of clear web. It's looking at some easily accessible sites like 4chan, 8chan, Reddit, for example, where they might be talking about you. And that gives you visibility into those, but as well as how they can pivot from that clear web into the deep and dark web, and showing you all that, all with actionable data. We call it actionable data. It's alerts, and all framed and mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So all your analyst does is click in, see what the new alert is, and then can follow the MITRE ATT&CK framework to mitigate that risk. Maybe it's a leaked password, credential, maybe it's a phishing site. could be any vulnerabilities or open ports that you may not be aware about. And then if there's any conversations or traffic happening, right? That's the automated piece. The manual piece is going to be Cerberus, but there's a bit of automation in play there where we can create Boolean logic strings to say, hey, I'm leveraging Fortinet firewall, and I want to be notified if there's any new 0 days, exploits, leaks, or RDP web shell access, things like that. And then, of course, that tool is going to send you an email notification when there is a new forum post, a new market listing, paste bin pages, whatever it might be that you're interested in seeing for that specific keyword. And you can set up how frequently you want to be notified, whether it's hourly, daily, immediately, weekly. So yeah, there is some automation there. You set it up and it's kind of, we don't expect your analyst to be in the tool every day. So we've created this way to be more efficient, where security teams can focus their efforts where they need to for the time being until something more crucial comes along.
Great, thanks so much. I have one more question from my end for both you and George. So cybersecurity investments are necessary. We understand that, but ultimately they're costly. And as many entities will tell you, whether they're enterprises, law enforcement, it comes down to cost. So two-part question. Even with the cost factor, why is it still a necessary investment? And number two, what else can regional law enforcement agencies, government agencies, enterprises do to mitigate against cyber disruption? I guess just to bring everything home. So I'll repeat again. So number one, we know investments are costly, but why are they necessary? You can both take that first.
If I may jump in first, Stephen, my thought process would be that cyber disruption affects business continuity. It can bring your operations to a grinding halt. And of course, that's a responsibility from the board level right down. So in terms of trying to be proactive and preventing that, that to me is a significant business justification for doing all we can to allow the business to continue. And in that regard, while we're going to have to look at cost, we also have to look at continuity of the business. And that's an important consideration. What do I need to do to ensure that there's no threat to my business not operating tomorrow morning or in a week's time? That means being a lot more aware of what I can do in terms of preventing cybersecurity disruption. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, what I would, I'm glad you took that, George. Look, I'm the engineer at the end of the day. To me, protecting my assets. So if I have my bank account, my personal information, I don't think there is amount of money that I would protect if I lost it all. Like I would pay any sort of dollar amount when it comes to protecting myself. If tomorrow I woke up, my home was taken, my bank account was gone, I would be devastated, of course, homeless. So from an engineering side of things, perspective at least, if you know how much and understand how much these ransomware groups ask for, it could be in the hundreds, if not millions of dollars. What is an insurance policy is the way I kind of look at it, a small price that I can pay to make sure that this doesn't at least affect my organization, my risk, right? We're not only monitoring ourselves, we're monitoring third-party suppliers and understanding the risk involved there. So giving all of that information, making sure that I'm safe, I think it's a very small price to pay, because if you woke up tomorrow and all of your data was stolen and blocked, and a ransomware group saying, hey, we need $1 million, otherwise you're not getting all this hard work that you've done back, and I'll delete it. So in my eyes, it's a very small price to pay. I don't know what the price is, just engineer, like I said, but if someone's coming at me with $1 million, I couldn't pay that, and I would lose everything I had. So
yeah, the cost, as you said, to invariably restore your credibility is more than the cost to just shore up your security. Sorry, George, go ahead.
The other point I wanted to make is that because in the Caribbean, some of us are small territories. Maybe what we should do is look at how we can collaborate via the CSME, the CARICOM initiatives, where we come together as a group of countries and negotiate with the vendors and the providers so that it's a group of entities that combine to get maybe better pricing discounts. And, you know, looking at initiatives like these, rather than going in isolation, we go as a group and negotiate for better pricing. And those are some of the things that we ought to be doing. And of course, I expect that we may have some of our friends from CARICOM Impacts attending. We should start some conversations with them to see how that can be put into practice.
Yeah, and even the different law enforcement agencies. I'll come back to that last point. Well, Stephen, I see you're responding to it, but I'll mention it to the wider audience. Just to confirm, the solution is cloud-based.
Yep, it's cloud-based. It's accessed through any one of your browsers, and we're agentless. So we don't deploy anything. It's actually very simple. It's just logging into the profile and start setting up your profile within DarkIQ, if we're talking about DarkIQ, right? And that's the attribution that I mentioned earlier, collecting that, which takes anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes per profile. As you get used to it, takes 5 to 10 minutes. And then letting that run. That's the automated piece. And then with Cerberus, because you have Searchlight Cyber, you have Calibra, it's a team effort, right? Moving forward, we make sure that from day one, your profile is set up exactly to how you want it. That means from Cerberus, do we have all the proper alerts around security tools, around intel that you're hoping to see moving forward? So again, from day one, we make sure that's all set up. We have a portfolio of archived different searches we've done. We provide that. We have training. So yeah, ultimately, you're set up from day one. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll mention as well, there's the newsletter, Searchlight Cyber's newsletter, which we encourage everyone to sign up to. Beacon, it's available on the Searchlight website. You also initiated a recent podcast. Listen to a few episodes. That's been great as well. It gives you good insight into, you know, marketplaces and different materials on dark web. So just to wrap, because we are almost at time, and I appreciate everyone that stayed on and has spent their morning with us. So as we close, you know, we hope that we've met your expectations for today. If there's anything else specific that you would like more information on, please contact us via email or telephone. For Stephen, George, and the wider team to give you some more insight on, we can set up a consult or demo. I want to thank George and Stephen again for your time. Stephen, your presentation, you know, was very insightful. Really appreciate it as always. For the attendees, thank you again. We ask you to complete the post-event survey, which you'll see once you exit, and a recording of today's webinar will be emailed to you. Again, if you have any questions, you would like further information, you may reach out to us, info@calibrasolutions.com. Some of you are some of our customers and you know where to find us directly. Both myself and George. You can also telephone us, 1-868-221-6831. Thank you to the Calibra team for your support in getting all of these attendees here. Really appreciate your efforts. Thank you to the event management team, TCJ Events, for another, you know, flawless execution. Follow Calibra Solutions, please, on social media, where we'll provide more information about more events that we have coming up, as well as just ongoing information on dark web security and cybersecurity in general. And I wish everyone a wonderful rest of your Wednesday and a great rest of your week. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your support.
Thanks, everyone. All the best.
Yes, thank you everyone for your time. Have a great day.